Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Data. Today, we're going to take a look at how to do secure administration. Christian being a long time in the business now, having done a lot of stuff. Yeah, not talking about the beard here.
It's a grayness of the beard I was thinking about.
The grayness, that's great. So, Christian, how do we do secure administration of IT nowadays?
Depending on what you see in the media, we might not actually do it. It's difficult, right? I mean, nowadays we, for the most part, we use single sign-on services. We log on once and then we're logged in everywhere, which also opens up an attack surface from there if your account gets compromised. So it's difficult to figure out how you do your IT infrastructure administration or user administration or whatever, and not at the same time open up the kind of wormhole of all access for everyone if your account has been compromised, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a trade-off there, and like with everything else in IT, it depends, I guess.
Okay, then we're finished now.
Yeah.
It depends is the ultimate answer.
Yeah.
So let's see you next time. No, just kidding.
Yeah, the other solution is just have everything offline. That also works.
Okay, maybe not.
No.
I don't know.
No. It's really hard to. It's true. It's hard to administrate something that you can't reach. So offline is probably also not a good idea.
I think we don't call it offline; we call it air-gapped, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. Just to have that right. No, kidding. Just back to the basics. I think one of the first things I hope everybody is doing it right now, but still we have to mention it. Don't use your admin account for daily business, right? I think that is still the baseline that everybody has to access. Your admin account shouldn't be able to surf the internet and shouldn't be on the same account, or you shouldn't have the admin permissions on your daily user account. Let's put it like that.
Exactly.
I think that's the base, right?
And it absolutely shouldn't be the same account you check your emails with.
Yeah.
Right. So keep that separate. That's a major factor of attack surfaces, right? When you get an email, whatever, click on something, and if you already have admin access with your email account or the account you're logged into and checking your email, well, all bets are off, right? So keep those separated as much as possible.
Yep.
But how can you do that? I mean, you have one account, you log onto your laptop, your whatever, your daily driver workstation, and then you need to log into some system, be it your vSphere environment or your storage admin console or whatever. So how do you do that in reality? I mean, how do you combine the two?
That's where the fun starts. And there's not that one answer, I think, and I fear.
Yeah, it depends.
Yes, there we are again. I have seen different models for that. One model being like the jump host solution, where you really canalize every communication or every administration access through dedicated jump servers. Ideally, not one jump server for all the admin access, but several for the several tiers. Let's put it like that. When you follow the 3-tier model, for example. So let's say you have your domain admin. Your domain admin stuff can only be done with the domain admin jump server or the tier 0 admin jump server. And then there's maybe some user administration that you have to do in Active Directory, which would be a different jump server then, because it's a different account. But you have to maintain that. And for the jump servers, there's always the question, who is managing the jump servers and which accounts are managing this jump servers? Because only using a jump server will help you for a lot, but if you don't do it right, you still open the security floodgates, just different ones, and sophisticated persons will find that way in anyway.
Yeah, it's once they're in, they can spend time figuring out what's going on and which account does actually have access and target that, exactly. Right? So you're by just doing jump hosting, you're basically moving it one layer away from the end user or the end administrator, but you're not securing it properly
Not
anyway.
Yet. Yeah,
right?
Not yet. This is maybe one part. I think the advantage of a jump server is that you can at least focus your security measures. Let's say you can lock down your jump servers. You can do a large amount of monitoring that is really focused on them. And if you know what the work is that has to be done on each server, then you really can lock it down with something like AppLocker and monitor for anything that doesn't fit the normal behavior of such a system, and can alert way easier. And going forward, you can limit the access to the systems you manage to only be accessible from your jump servers, doing I don't know, firewall policies or IP subnetting or whatever. Again, bringing down the attack surface to those devices or systems. But still, yeah, you have to think who is doing software patching there. If this is the same account, then software patching for the workstations, maybe you're not finished with thinking about it.
Yeah. Either way, however you kind of spin it, something needs to have access to something anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a potential threat or a risk that as long as something can connect to something, there's a risk there. And you don't remove that risk by doing jump hosts, or you can even do on-demand VDI sessions, right? For admin sessions where you log on to a virtual desktop environment, you get provisioned a desktop with the software you need to manage whatever it is you're managing. And once you log out, that gets deleted and removed. So then you have to ensure that you secure the way that those VMs or VDI machines are actually provisioned, because if someone can just provision them, you're back to square one again. Exactly. So it's a difficult thing, and it's a moving target all the time, right? But then again, you still use user accounts, you still use passwords. You need to secure that as well. It doesn't. You can't just put it somewhere else and say it's secure, because it's not. You just moved it. You made it perhaps more secure by limiting access to it, but it's still not a secure solution on its own.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So how would you secure that? Just putting 2FA everywhere? And how do you do it for those different accounts? Or what is your experience there?
Yeah, 2FA is good. I mean, it helps reduce the attack surface. It makes it more difficult. It helps you with when passwords get lost or published somewhere or something like that. It really, really does help secure your environment. It makes it better from a security perspective. But that, again, once you've logged on, if you have the two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication token, you're still in, right? So, and everything's possible. I mean, basically nothing is secure anyway. So everything we're trying to do is pretty much, as you mentioned, reduce the attack surface, make it more difficult to get in. And if someone gets in, you need to ensure that you limit the potential damage as well. But yeah, doing things like privileged identity management, doing privileged access management, similar but different things, which I guess you have more experience with than I have. But they don't. Privileged identity management, or PIM, versus privileged access management, which is PAM. They're not the same, and one doesn't equate the other, but in combination, they might do something good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So things like limiting the access hours or the hours that an administrative action can be done, for example, with privileged access management, or with PIM, really just getting the permissions for that time that you needed to use it. So my account, even my admin account, doesn't hold the full permissions all the time. Only if I need to change something in my Azure environment or wherever, I will then get that permission. It will be noted. It will be logged that I chose it. And if I have a security operations team, then they can check and see, oh, Christian now elevated his privileges. Is this correct? Should he be able to do this right now? And then again, doing proper monitoring, I can see normally Christian is doing this only between 9 and 4 p.m. or something like that. And suddenly at 3 a.m., he's elevating. Oh, this might be something strange. So really focusing.
You can also time limit those, right? So you can
also time limit.
Say that, okay, you'll be granted access to do this for the next 2 hours, and then it's automatically removed again. Yes. So it doesn't leave any gaping holes lingering in your environment once you actually don't use that access anymore, which is also a very, very good thing to consider. I mean, many breaches happen because of either poor passwords or good passwords, but no kind of expiration on when they can be used and how they can be used. And you can also combine that with where is the user logging on from? Is they logging on from a valid source, or it's all of a sudden my account is in the Antarctica or something like that? That doesn't make any sense, right? So you can also do checks based on other factors than just the username and password and the MFA token.
Yeah, and that's so important. It's getting more and more relevant because, especially in the online world, you nowadays have tokens, right? You have your permissions are bound to your tokens and your access and everything, and those tokens can be stolen. They can be retrieved through some machine in the middle attacks. And if that token is with an attacker, and you only rely on the token that is active, then those attackers are in. So you can enforce more security policies there to just be able to log in from dedicated devices that are based within your company, for example, or that dedicated locations that you meant, stuff like that. So always combine it and put it in there. But now we're getting very close to online. I would like to come back a little bit more to like the practice of having those different accounts and accessing those different tiers, or however you want to call your security levels. Did you experience something like having 3 different notebooks for your different work types? Something like that? A secure access workstation or privileged access workstation?
Yeah, well, I've worked with customers that only allow fiber connections to their end user devices, because Ethernet can be kind of, you can look at the radiation and wires and there's something called Tempest, which is a kind of a way of securing a physical location, basically within a Faraday cage, pretty much.
Okay.
And the entire building or floor. These customers use basically fiber optic connections only because they can't be tapped.
Okay.
But then again, they had perhaps 3 or 4 different thin clients on their desktops, on their desk. One for that environment, one for that environment, and one for that environment, because they're physically cabled differently, and they weren't allowed to cross any data between them at all. So you're basically on your desk, you have 4 thin clients, and you switch your monitor around and figure out, okay, where's my keyboard connected now, and how do I do this, and stuff like that. So there are those environments as well that they're completely air-gapped. There is no external connection at all.
Yeah.
And everything's served through fiber optics.
But I think this is really an extreme case, right?
Yeah.
This is nothing that can be done in a regular organization.
No, it doesn't make any sense, because how would end users actually connect to the data or use the services they provide, right?
But even for administration, does it make sense to have a dedicated notebook for your domain admin stuff, and a dedicated notebook for your server admin stuff, and a dedicated notebook for your user admin stuff? So it's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I would tend to advise that if you need that kind of separation, you should probably do it with a virtual desktop environment, right? And just use your laptop or workstation as an access point to the virtual desktop that you need for the given task, instead of having physical devices for each.
Yeah, makes sense. And what do you think about the idea that you at least get your tier 0 systems like domain admin, enterprise admin, stuff like that on a separate device that is completely managed out of your normal environment? So let's say you get those and they are fully Intune managed, completely locked down, only can log into the Microsoft portals, for example, or whatever you're using, and nothing else. Did you see something like that in the wild?
I've seen that as well, because basically if a domain admin in an Active Directory environment gets compromised, you have keys to the entire kingdom, right?
Exactly.
So it makes sense to separate that completely from everything else. And then walk through all of the services, all of the things you need, all of the management interfaces you need, and figure out what level of security do we need for that, what do we need for that, and categorize them based on their importance, basically, and then group them and group the access to those as well. And once you combine that with multi-factor and you combine that with PIM and PAM and its siblings, you start to get an environment where you actually, it's manageable. It's perhaps cumbersome to do as an administrator, but the opposite end of that is wide open floodgates and you're out of a job anyway. So I'd rather have it a bit cumbersome than being compromised, to be honest.
And no job after all.
At all, right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's so important to really have that, what you said at the moment, really go through your systems and categorize them, see what is connected to which. You don't have to go into the, 48th level of connection, but understand what system is talking to what and or to which other systems and why is it and who is administering it. And with administering, I think I would also always bring in 2 layers. We have once the administrating on the infrastructure side. So really, getting the infrastructure done to be able to use the service for the end user or for other admins. And then you have the administration on the service side. So for example, for a SQL server, you need a virtual machine or whatever. You need the SQL server itself to be running. And then there might be a different administrator doing kind of table optimization, creating new databases and stuff. For me, those are different types of administration. You have to look at those to really understand who needs what. Because, for example, in that SQL thing, the database administrator doesn't have to have the permissions for patching the Windows server, for example. And with that, having the permissions for all the other Windows servers also. I know SQL Server, if you are an admin, you're also a DB admin. I know that, but just as an example here.
Yeah, and the same applies for. I've mostly worked in VMware virtualized environments, right? So the people who manage the basic VMware vSphere infrastructure, be it the ESXi host, the vCenter, and everything, they don't need access to the VMs themselves, right? They don't need to be able to log into the VM, to any VM on the system, as long as it's not something that's an appliance that is used for the management of the vSphere environment itself. So there's separation of duties there that also helps. But then again, you get the kind of, a lot of those environments are set up with Active Directory, single sign-on. And if you don't separate your accounts, then basically, if you have access to the VMware hypervisor layer and manage that, you have access to everything.
Exactly.
You can get access to absolutely everything if you want to.
Yeah. True.
And people will.
And it's easy.
It is. There
are a lot of how-tos that can be found using your favorite search engine.
Yeah.
So your tip for the ESXi environment or VMware environment would also be to separate the main, let's call it root accounts, and not be AD integrated? Or what's your take on that?
Yes, pretty much. If you don't have everything else we've talked about in place in your Active Directory environment, keep your VMware environment out of it.
Perfect.
Make local vCenter access user accounts. Don't use AD integrated ones. Lock down the ESXi host with lockdown mode so you can't SSH into them and change stuff. And enable secure boot on them so that you minimize the possibility of someone changing scripts and cron jobs and whatever on the ESXi host themselves directly. Those are the three main things, because again, if your Active Directory, if your VMware admin gets compromised through Active Directory, and someone can log on to your vCenter with your Active Directory user account, they can find your Active Directory domain controller VM, copy that disk out, and then do a cracking on the offline of the NTDS file, and figure out all the passwords for all the users in your entire Active Directory without you even knowing that they were there, because they can do it offline if they get a copy of it.
You wouldn't notice anything in monitoring.
Yeah, you can do that without having any access to managing Active Directory at all. So if you don't have everything else in place, keep your VMware environment outside of your Active Directory, especially the Active Directory that you share with end users and stuff like that. Yeah. It might be a good idea to have separate Active Directory for management, put it in its own zone. You can use that as long as there's separation between the two.
Yeah, and that is also very hard to maintain. So nowadays, I don't recommend that to customers anymore, because normally they will set it up and it will be okay for half a year, and then something comes up and all your separation is going away again, and then you just have to maintain 2 or 3 or 5 Active Directories, which are somehow intermingled anyway. So that doesn't really help. So really focus more on separating on the logical layer, and then maybe doing that kind of stuff for the tier 0 stuff, really doing that in a different system or on a different notebook or something like that. Yeah, that's true.
That makes sense.
One other part where I think, which might be overlooked also very often, is the monitoring system. Typically, your monitoring system is having a lot of access, at least on many systems, because it has to do, right? You have to see availability and security monitoring and so on. How many monitoring systems are out there that have some kind of active possibilities on those systems they are monitoring? Some kind of remediation script possibility, or in case of a security, some kind of isolation or stopping processes and stuff like that. Take a look at that also. Also, your monitoring has to be regulated for that, because otherwise the monitoring admin is also a domain admin, basically.
Yeah.
Right? So we see that so often that, that's just overlooked, and it's so important to really get a close understanding what is happening there. Maybe you can also have different policies for your monitoring or security tools, and have role-based access there also. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, if we look at the kind of public threats or the things that have been attacked recently that someone has found a security vulnerability in. A lot of that is actually security products, right? It's VPN, firewalls, and stuff like that. So the very thing that we use to protect our environment is the very thing that gives someone else access to it.
Yeah.
And that's the same for monitoring software as well, right? So I'm guessing it's probably happened. I don't know any examples of it, but if it hasn't, it will. Where someone uses the monitoring system to actually run code on an endpoint because it has a remote execution possibility built into it. It's a feature, right? And so you look at something. Okay, go out and scan all these machines and figure out what's going on. That actually runs something on the end device. So if you can manipulate that to run something else, you're up and running, right? Yeah. So everything that has remote possibilities like that is also a potential attack vector as well.
And we're talking about software deployment, patch management, everything. Stuff like that. Your MSSP software that might be in use. And that's where the challenge comes in again. Who should be able to do that during normal work? So where would you start?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, most environments have evolved from a pretty flat kind of infrastructure where everything was in one network and everything was, and then we built over the years more and more defenses on top of it, instead of kind of scratching it and say, oh, let's start over, let's do this properly from the get-go. Yeah. And that kind of patchwork of things will also kind of leave there's bound to be something there that you've forgotten about, that you don't remember, that you don't have control over once everything's evolved naturally that way over the past 10, 15 years, right? So it's a difficult thing.
But for your Active Directory, would you recommend an AD admin to just use publicly available tools like, let's say, Pingcastle or Bloodhound or something like that, to just get that to get that start, to really run that stuff and see how bad it really is?
No, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I'd like to hear your take on it, though. Yeah. But yeah, it's
I think yes. I think that would be a good way to just get an understanding what kind of possibilities there are. Because when you are just using some kind of benchmark tooling or just some kind of documentation, you don't really have the connection to your environment. And with stuff like that, I don't know, Bloodhound, there are several out there that can be used freely. Always talk to your security team, because otherwise they will slap you when they detect something like that. But use those tools. They are free. They are just scanning your system, and they will give you proper output and tell you, okay, there are so many underused accounts, and those systems have too many privileges and stuff like that. And that you can then use as a starting point, and always, maybe also get that funding for several days to really make yourself some thoughts about your infrastructure and how that could be split up, how that historically build up mess could be maybe shrink down a little bit and take one part out of it and make it right, make it secure. Just make sure your domain admins can't log onto your workstations and to your normal servers, stuff like that. That needs time, but you need to have an understanding for that. And
shouldn't in reality the security team do that?
Oh, it really depends. Oftentimes the security team is just reactive because there are a lot of things to work on also in the security, and you have the separation of duties, because configuring the systems oftentimes is an operations work. So like IT ops, and then there's security, and security is maybe defining how should it be done, but they are not doing it themselves. So it's, if you remember several years back, we had that DevOps things where development and operations should be working closer together. I think SecOps is really also a thing. Get your security and your operations team work together. And you can do that with joint workshops, for example, which are, I would say, focused on a specific topic. So, for example, you have your client team. Your client team knows about weaknesses that they see, which your security team might not even know about, that they are there in reality. But the security team, on the other hand, knows how it should be done in theory. So bring them together and see, is this addressed in reality, yes or no? And ops can say, yeah, it should be addressed, but there's that way around it. So let's talk. How can we close that down? Or do we accept that and have to find a different way to secure that open gate? So bring people together to talk about it.
That's the thing, right? As long as we continue with this kind of siloed approach to things, the solutions will also be siloed.
Yes.
And it wouldn't be coherent, right? And that's what, in many cases, got us into a lot of this mess in the first place.
Yes.
Because Team A did that, Team B did that, and Team C came along and did something different.
But in reality, it is very hard to do, especially in large organizations. It is really, really hard to get that communication up and running, because suddenly you have 15, 16, 20 people in a meeting. One person is talking and all the others are writing emails or reading stuff. Take a look at what your surface is, your attack surface is there, and how you can, with small steps, improve your administration to get that more secure.
I'm guessing that following these kind of guidelines with identity management and access management, separation of duties, separation of management versus or administration versus day-to-day emailing work, stuff like that, would, in a guesstimate, would reduce the amount of attacks and the amount of successful ransomware attacks by, I'm guessing, 95%.
Yeah. Combined with MFA, we're by 98 now. And then when you made it to the last 2%, you have done a lot of things right.
Yeah.
And
then you might actually say that, okay, this is actually secure enough.
Yeah, we can't do anything anymore because this is what is technically feasible, what is usable. Otherwise, we can go back to the beginning of this episode where we say, just take it offline. And then you're also secure.
Yeah.
So,
with everything happening with NIS2 and all of those things, there should be also a monetary kind of incentive for organizations to actually do this, because that would probably reduce the risk of you getting fined for something pretty well. You should be able to reduce the risk pretty well by following basic kind of, it's not basic, but it's the principles are basic. It's not basic to implement it, but it's the principles behind how we should do this in a well-designed manner are available. They are possible to get a hold of. There's a lot of documentation out there. It's absolutely possible to do, but it takes time and it takes a lot of collaboration between the teams.
Exactly. You need to be keeping on. You're not finished. You're not ever finished with that. That I think is also something management has to understand. IT security is nothing that will get finished. It just will improve, and it has to improve and will change. But it's IT, right? That's I think the motto of it anyway.
Yeah, and nothing is a tick box.
True. Christian, thanks a lot. Thanks for your insights. I think there's a lot of things that can be done, should be done, but it's not easy, as you said. But start at least, and start with that direction. Do the small steps, but do them.
Yeah.
And see you in the next episode. Thanks.
See ya.